First became aware of the Illuminati as such when I was able to start my research. Now, I realized when I first got out of the Bureau and started working these type cases, the McDonald case, and it grew from there, that there was something drastically wrong because we had case after case. I had case after case where there was a cover-up, not only by the federal government, by the FBI and DEA, and but also by the locals, the LAPD. I have a case, a classic case where the LAPD covered up, and so one thing led to another, and then as I developed the information and started researching and started going into the book, so to speak, and rather than just interviewing people, I was able to put it all together. And I was active involved in the investigation of the McMartin preschool. In the McMartin preschool, this is back in the 1980s, a young child, this is preschool, 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old children, up to 5 years of age. And the children said that there were tunnels under the school, you went in, the entrance was under the rabbit cage outside classroom number 4. And there were tunnels that had been, and they went through the tunnels up into the trap door of the triplex next door. And they were taken out in automobiles. Also, I had an informant tell me that the children were taken up into the mountains for ceremonies. And the informant told me exactly where that location was. And the house on that location burned down the day after the information was made public in the newspapers about this case, that the McMartin, allegations of McMartin preschool involvement in this activity. And it was built on it was like a fortress built on the side of the mountain. It extended, probably 100 yards. And the only way you could see it was from the air. It was on the side of the mountains, aside from where the road was. In other words, you'd have to get out of your car and walk up over a hill and look down. I know this is where the kids were taken because the kids talked about being flown up into the mountains. As far as I'm concerned, the McMartin preschool case, the whole case was a farce. The kids were telling the truth. The police, when they interviewed the kids, claimed that the therapist had planted this information in the children's minds. This is a huge, huge cover-up. About this same time, other cases were exposed around the country. There was one in North Carolina, another one in Oregon. I think Washington had one. And stop and think about this. The Satanists want to get their hands on these kids young, when they're real young, right? And by getting them when they're young, they can get them MK Ultra mind control program, instill it into the kids. But they want to get their hands and indoctrinate these kids in preschool, 2, 3, 4, 5 years of age. And that's part of the MK Ultra mind control program. I happen to know of dependents, military dependent children, who are victims of this. And they may not even realize it. But this is going on. This is going on in America. Wake up, America. Well, if they don't work for the FBI, from whom are they receiving their paycheck? They're getting their check from the FBI, the federal government. What I'm telling you is, in my 23 years of experience and research and investigations and lectures and TV appearances, the Illuminati has infiltrated our intelligence community. It's not only infiltrated the intelligence community, it's infiltrated every level of society. Over the last 23, 24 years, I have developed so much information about the situation as it exists in our great country and gone public with it as much as possible, and yet I am being ignored. Now, in looking through the situation, and as a result of my research, of course, I knew that we were advised about Pearl Harbor several days before the attack on Pearl Harbor, yet It was supposed to be a surprise attack. As we all know, and as well documented, we knew in advance of Pearl Harbor. It was covered up. And then you have the Jack Kennedy assassination. There was more than one shooter involved in the Kennedy assassination. Lee Harvey Oswald was a pawn. It was a combination of the CIA and the Chicago mob, Sam Giancana. And then we had Bobby Kennedy assassination. Bobby Kennedy's assassination, there were more bullet holes in the walls and the doors than Saran's gun could hold. There were more people involved in that, another cover-up. And next we had the World Trade Center bombing in February 1993. Unfortunately, there were 6 people killed. But what happened there was the FBI had an informant, Salam, a 43-year-old former Egyptian army officer, and he wore a body mic when he went on his contacts with the terrorists. And as a result, they had an open and closed case at the trial. However, he testified at the trial that he also wore a body mark when he was interviewed by the FBI agents. And at that time, he said that, hey, I've been commissioned to put the bomb together by the terrorists. We're going to use a dummy bomb, aren't we? His superiors in the FBI said, no, we're going to use a real bomb. The point being, the FBI not only knew in advance of the bombing of the World Trade Center in February 1993, the FBI furnished the ingredients for the bomb. But then we had Oklahoma City. And in Oklahoma City, which occurred in 1995, they claimed that Tim McVeigh and Nichols were involved. I personally made 2 trips to Oklahoma City out of my pocket and investigated the case. I have a 220-some page report that's available to the public concerning this situation. And I was told by an inside investigator that there were at least 11 other people involved in Oklahoma City. And then after Oklahoma City, we had the World Trade Center. Of course, September 11th, 2001. And it's been well documented through numerous sources that there was much more to this than we've been told by the mainstream media.
The Illuminati was founded on May 1st, 1776, by Adam Weishaupt, a professor at Ingolstadt University. Weishaupt obviously had been a serious student of the occult, for many of its bizarre features and symbols were incorporated into his organization. Weishaupt had been active in the Masonic lodges of Germany, and found in them the perfect vehicle for recruiting into his secret order, which he described publicly as the highest level of Freemasonry. The Illuminati was formally incorporated into the Masonic lodges at the Congress of Wilhelmsbad in 1780. There were 8 conspiratorial rings within rings, advancing from the outermost novice inward to Rex, or king. The king, of course, was Weishaupt himself, who had adopted the code name Spartacus. Those in the outer rings were told that the grand purpose of the order was to make of the human race, without any distinction of nation, condition, or profession, one good and happy family. But by the time the member had advanced to the level of presbyter, or priest, his oath of absolute secrecy and obedience had become deadly serious. Only then was he allowed finally to see the ultimate goal of the order. It was the destruction of all religion and the destruction of all independent governments, replaced by a new world order, a world government ruled from behind the scenes by the illuminated ones.
On May the 1st, it's Communist holiday, by the way, of 1776, Adam Weishaupt announced the 25 goals. And these goals were, the number 8th goal was to corrupt the youth through sex and drugs. Number 12 rule was to elect their own people, elect Illuminati to offices. I'm sure they've done that in Washington. And number 13 was to control the press. Well, on February the 9th, 1917, Congressman Calloway announced that the J.P. Morgan interests had bought up 25 of America's leading newspapers and inserted their own editor in order to control the press. Before they bought up these 25 newspapers, they did a survey of 179 newspapers, and they picked these 25 as the key newspapers where they felt they could be effective. And it has been effective. You're getting information from me today that you won't get from the mainstream media. Fortunately, there are a few press releases now and then that do corroborate what I'm telling you. The 14th goal of the Illuminati I find very interesting because it fits right into Pearl Harbor, Jack Kennedy, Waco, World Trade Center 93, Oklahoma City bombing, the 9/11 attacks. The 14th goal of the Illuminati is to create a crisis and then come in and pretend like you are the savior. And that's what's happened in order to pass the anti-terrorism legislation. So what's happening in America today, folks? Well, let me tell you what I think is happening. The anti-terrorism legislation was initially written under the George Bush Sr. administration in the 1980s. A female Department of Justice attorney made the statement publicly, before this legislation passes, people will have to be killed. Fast forward to February 1993. We have the car bomb, okay? 6 people were killed, right? Not enough. There was $500,000 in damage and 1,000 people injured. However, fast forward to April 1995, Oklahoma City, 168 people, maybe 169 killed. Within a year after that, the anti-terrorism legislation, which was authored under the George Bush Sr. administration, passed. But it wasn't tough enough. So we had to have another terrorist attack, right? September 11, 2001, we had the attack on the World Trade Center. So what do we have now? Now we have Homeland Security that takes over all law enforcement, local, state, and federal, in the event of an emergency situation. It has the authority to take over private businesses, child protective services. They want 1 in every 10 Americans to be a snitch or an informant for the government. Children would be trained in terrorism. They already have FEMA camps set up for this. And then they have Operation Garden Plot. That's that's a book that was written in 1993 by the Air Force as to how to handle the civilians who are interned under certain circumstances. And now we're talking about national identification cards. In control of all the money you earn and spend, includes money in the grocery store, of course. Microchips to locate children by satellite. New cars will have tracking devices. And then we had Patriot Act number 1, and this is H.R. 3261. Under certain circumstances, Americans will not be able to face their peers in a trial. You will not be given an attorney. You can be held without bond. Librarians can be prosecuted if they don't report the issuance of certain books that are lent out to people who are come into the library. Search warrants searches without search warrants. They can jail Americans without trial. They can jail without being charged. Americans can jail without being charged. And they will be gathering information such as private data on credit card records, bank transactions, car rental receipts, gun purchases, along with the quantities of intelligence information. Pawns in the game, it outlines the 25 goals of the Illuminati, which were announced at a conference May the 1st, 1776, by a defrocked priest named Adam Weishaupt in Germany. And these 25 goals included corrupt the youth through sex and drugs, elect your own people to office, meaning the Illuminati, control the media. If you can't elect your own people, put your people in there as agenteurs and agents and advisors. And the list just goes on and on and on. And that list, that 25 goals are right, I'd say right now about 85% complete. In further research, it would